I just want to talk about this story, which I mentioned at the beginning. Wes Streeting ordering a review. This will be an independent review. We're told to look and examine this just incredible rise in mental health. That includes autism, ADHD as well. These diagnoses are through the roof. I mean, just every single day, more and more cases. These are the leading reasons, by the way, for sickness benefit claims. 4.4 million people now on disability or incapacity in this respect. The review will examine possible overdiagnosis and whether everyday stress is being medicalised. That's always the issue. Richard Sloggett, founder and programme director with Future Health, is with us. Often helps us out on these stories. Afternoon to you, Richard. I mean, that last point there seems to be the big bone of contention. Are we overdiagnosing? Are we also medicalising just basic jip that we all suffer in life?
Yeah, nice to be back on here. And I think, as you say, we've seen a real jump in the number of cases for mental health conditions. I think it's gone up by something like a quarter in the last 20 years, and the ADHD cases in particular have doubled. So I think the Health Secretary saying he's going to have a look at this is welcome. It's going to be coming at it from a clinical lens. So we're going to get some doctors and others looking at this and saying, look, are we getting this right? Because that is a significant rise. Now, some people will say, look, modern life is very, very stressful. There's lots of different sort of moving parts and factors and things that we didn't necessarily have in the past. But these numbers are really concerning. The welfare bill is rising and we're struggling to afford it. I think this review probably comes at the right time. Big question, though, is what's the purpose of the review? If the review finds that we are overdiagnosing these cases, are we going to go back through old cases and have people reappraised? Or if it finds that we aren't overdiagnosing it, then how are we going to find the money to pay for all the services that people can't access? So the review is a helpful thing, I think, but it could have some quite important implications both for the individuals affected and the service and the funding for it more widely.
Absolutely. And of course it is, I mean, I know people sometimes cruelly talk about, mental health being the new bad back thing. And I understand where that comes from, but it is very hard to diagnose it. We talk about, misdiagnosing and sometimes people, including medics, just simply transposing everyday stresses for, something more. I know it's not as easy as some say to suddenly say, I've got a mental health condition, but to those individuals, and maybe younger generations, I might be stereotyping here, being worried or stressed or, thinking about life ahead, will I ever get a mortgage? Will the job I get allow me to even leave home? And all of this. To each individual, those symptoms, if that's the right word, are very real. So they would say, yeah, I have a mental health condition. How does anyone come along and say, actually, we've looked at your case, you haven't got one?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we have done, which has been a real success, is we have destigmatized people coming forward to say that they have a mental health problem. And I think that is a good thing. I think people saying that they're not feeling as well mentally as they could be, I think is a positive development, which we've seen in recent times. However, there is a case that where is the right balance to be struck? Now, there was a piece of work that was done recently, I think you will have covered it on your show, which was a review done by the former head of John Lewis about how you keep people in work healthy and what employers can do. But one of the real things that Charlie Mayfield, who's the guy who wrote the review, said was there is a responsibility on employees as well as employers and the government to look after themselves and to make sure that they're, well. It's not just the responsibility of the state and others to do so. And that balance is the thing that we need to try and find. You are right. It is tricky, but at the same, and there will be people with legitimate issues. But what we can't have is a system that goes too far the other way. And this is what I think the review is going to look into. As I say, albeit from a clinical perspective, as you rightly identified at the top, wider welfare reforms have been much more difficult to achieve by this government. So they're coming at this time from more of a clinical perspective.
And I suppose it's important to separate out, because I can hear some people sort of shouting at their radios going, well, hang on a second, my kid has ADHD. I don't consider that to be a mental health issue in the kind of conventional sense of the word. And this is very real, but of course there's a huge increase in those areas as well. I mean, are we just living in a society where we're having kids that are growing up in a weird and very different world, and therefore some of them are susceptible to it? Is it predisposed? Nobody seems to really know what's behind this. And of course, I know this from my own experience as well. You don't just get a diagnosis for it either. You've got to jump through hoops.
Yeah, and it's a complex set of issues, and one of the most interesting things that you've just raised is the sort of modern life environment in which we live, where we're sort of bombarded with information and ability to access things more instantly, and that sort of environment in which we live, is that causing some of these issues? And trying to unpick some of the sort of academic and scientific literature on that is, I think, again, something that this review really does need to get into, because the other thing is, what we don't want to do is to give people a diagnosis of something that they actually don't have. That's really, really not what we want to see at all.
Yeah, indeed. Richard, thank you for your time, sir. Really appreciate that. Richard Sloggett, founder and program director at Future Health. I mean, having two little kids, I'm aware of the amount of children within classes and going through the school years, from reception to now year 7 with my eldest, and reception to now year 2 with my youngest, three. I mean, it's a non-stop conversation in some respects, and it's an extraordinary pressure on the teachers. And I know there is a really kind of, sort of one-size-fits-all answer that some people put through, and that is, well, it's just bad kids. Well, of course, people with ADHD aren't necessarily bad kids. I mean, I know a kid with ADHD who is definitely not a bad kid. He's in fact a wonderful kid, but he has some kind of quirks and behavioural issues that aren't necessarily, they're not bad. You wouldn't call them bad at all. Another mate of my little boy who was over a little while ago, who's autistic, not on the severe autistic spectrum, if that's still the right word, but he's there, and he's very different. He sits out from certain play because it's too loud. He doesn't like the sort of the clash, the noise, and all that goes with it. He'd rather be drawing, and there's all the nice. I'm sure at home there's other issues that his parents experience. These aren't made up, is my point. So where does that come from? How have we got there? The mental health thing on the wider issue, I feel a bit depressed, so therefore can I have some antidepressants? I mean, you can get, I promise you can get antidepressants like that from the GP. You might not get the strong stuff, but you get something. Is that some kind of, does that sort of just give you the I forgot the correct terminology for it, but it just give you the placebo kind of effect almost? Or is, are we just kind of confusing everyday stress for a mental health thing? I mean, everybody says it now, don't they? Even in my other half said to me, messaged me this morning, let's get the Christmas stuff done this next week or 10 days. I'm getting really stressed about it. Not good for my anxiety. It was not a mental health condition. She's just simply saying, there's a lot to do. There's people coming over. There's presents to buy for the kids. You've got to buy the food, all this stuff. It does take a little bit of juggling along with the kids to get all of that in place. That's just a term. There will be some people who will translate that term to having a condition. How do you decide who has and who hasn't? Good luck with anyone who can somehow define that one.